I'll start again. Very pleased to welcome everybody here tonight to our council meeting of the 17th of April. Give me pride to start with the acknowledging the Bangla people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet tonight, and pay our respects to the elders past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be present tonight. And with our opening prayer, Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to grant thy blessing upon the work of this council, to direct and prosperous deliberations, to the advancement of this city, and for the true and lasting welfare of the people of this municipality. Amen. And I also ask God stand or remain seated as we reflect on the obituary notices of our past residents. And then, as usual, for a minute of silence. Betty Webber, John Caldwell, Ian Giles, Dieter Cruz, Kimberly Pershing, Travis Terry, Kathleen Mounsey, Eric Wise, Brian Hayes, David Coe, Olive McKenna, and a very respected former resident of Whyalla, a surgeon and a doctorate past well known to many people in Whyalla, Michael Patkin. Thank you. We have two apologies tonight, Deputy Mayor Pond and Councillor Todd. Although Councillor Todd is online because she can't make it tonight, she is officially an apology, and we welcome her online. We have no leave of absence. Item 5, council members and executive declarations. Firstly, council members, does anybody have a conflict of interest they wish to declare? The executive? Sorry, Councillor Westerman.
Conflict of interest for 13.2.1 as the budget briefly mentions the hotel development. Happy to stay in the meeting.
Thank you. And 5.2, any gifts and benefits to declare? No gifts and benefits, thank you. Item 6.1, the confirmation of the minutes of our previous ordinary council meeting held on 20th of March. We have a recommendation. Moved Councillor Knox, seconded Councillor Westerman. Everybody's in favour. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, carried. Item 6.2, the confirmation of minutes of our special council meeting held on Tuesday, 4th of April. Somebody care to move the motion? Councillor Simpson, seconded Councillor Inglis. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 6.3, the noting of the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on Monday, 3rd of April. We have a recommendation there. We have a mover in Councillor Klobuchar, and I don't think Phil Stone seconded it. Phil Stone's not come up there as a seconder.
Mark Inglis.
No, he was. I see so. Okay, so there's a seconder in councillor Inglis. I'll put the motion, those in favour? Carried, thank you. Item 7, which is deputations and presentations, we have nil. 8, in petitions, we have nil. 9, matters adjourned or laid on the table, we have nil. 10, public question time, we have nil. Item 11, we have the council members' activities, which will be up on the screen. Shall scroll through them there. I think the amount of events and happenings that our members are attending is indicative of how busy this council is at the moment, the start of a new council year. Thank you for those. Item 12, committee reports. We have nil. Now, what I'm about to ask is the leave of the meeting to bring forward item 19.2.1 for discussion at this stage of the meeting. Now, I'll seek a mover and a seconder to bring it forward. And then once that's successful, I will then seek a mover and seconder to go into confidential. Councillor Knox, you're moving it. Councillor Inglis, you seconded. You leave to bring forward the item. I'll put the motion, put the recommendation. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. But I now have a mover and seconder to go into confidence. Everybody's pressing their buttons. Move Councillor Simpson, seconded Councillor Knox. I will put that motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Going back to our agenda, item 13, Council Officers Report. 13.1, the Office of the Chief Executive. His ordinary report was 13.1.1. You wish to speak to it, CEO, or respond to questions?
I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Do you have any questions for the CEO? Otherwise, I'll call somebody to move. Second, receive and note the CEO's report. Move Councillor Borders, seconded Councillor Westerman. Those in favour? Thank you.
You can see it maybe two on that one.
You'll notice I'm focusing on the screen.
I think Zia moved it and I seconded it.
Yeah, what's happening is if you keep putting you in as number 2, Zia went in first and then Peter came in and ended up where you should be.
I'm trying to make sure that when I do call them, they're still in the order that I see them. See, yeah. Right, in that case, moving on to 13.2, corporate services. 13.2.1, the basis for the preparation of the draft 2023-24 annual business plan budgets. Here we, yes, CEO.
Before we see the move in a second for this item meeting, the start we've got some slides that we just want to run through to guide some format for the discussion of this item. So I'll just ask the slides to come up, and I'll ask Director of Corporate Services to take the lead on this item in the first instance.
During formal procedures as well.
When we get to the discussion today. No, we might do it now. Sorry, yeah, if we can, sorry, might be worth just letting the council seek a move and a second to suspend meeting procedures for say up to 30 minutes to enable informal discussion on this.
Yes, good idea. Thank you, CEO. And we have a motion for a mover in councillor Klobuchar. Seconded, councillor Knox. All in favour? Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, we wanted to take the opportunity to draw to council's attention feedback that has come through the audit committee when the audit committee considered the original annual business plan or the draft annual business plan and budget at their last meeting. The feedback from the audit committee was such that that they felt that the budget that had been prepared appeared to be a business as usual budget with no action being taken to address the deficit and or the level of borrowings that council has projected over the term of the long-term financial plan. I guess in the context of the business as usual statement, one of the things that I do want to draw to the council's attention is that there is savings built into the budget over the term of the long-term financial plan in the order of around $500,000, being $250,000 savings from about year 5, and I think Grant will correct me if I'm wrong, but from about year 5 in terms of seeking to get some efficiency and effectiveness improvements across the organisation with service delivery. So achieving some savings there across the term of the long-term financial plan. And also another $250,000 in terms of building rationalisation that we are looking to achieve through a body of work that is yet to be done around council's building rationalisation. So yes, the business as usual budget is one observation to make of it, but I did want to draw your attention that there is around $500,000 worth of savings that are projected through the long-term financial plan, and it still results in the deficit that you do see in the long-term financial plan. So just mention that up front. The audit committee has also highlighted that a higher priority needs to be placed on sourcing new funding or revenue levels or expanded levels of revenue. Financial re-engineering, how is it that we're actually managing the budget over the 10 years of the long-term financial plan, and looking to reduce the current and projected operating deficit and borrowing levels across the plan. Its comment is that council needs to act now to address matters of financial sustainability, and they're all very fair and reasonable statements coming from the audit committee and entirely appropriate. As council is very well aware, you know, the requirement for prudence across the expenditure elements of the council is certainly top of mind, and also the challenges in terms of revenue and the rating base that this council has in terms of its population levels and also the extent of infrastructure that the city has. Next slide, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. The current financial position, again, wanting to highlight that there was a council decision 2 years ago to adopt a new organisational structure with additional resources going towards city transformation and addressing the legacy issues. And it was a very intentional decision of the council at the time. It was known at the time that this would create a period across the long-term financial plan of deficits outside of target ranges, and that was an accepted position given the potential for additional income, which hasn't been built into the long-term financial plan from new development in the medium term. With the transformation of the city, it is very clear that there will be new development coming to the city over a period of time. We just do not know the timing of that new development at the moment. And so it hasn't actually been built into the long-term financial plan as yet. If additional income does not materialise, then the long-term financial plan will need to be corrected by reducing the resources after a 3 to 4 year horizon as originally envisaged. So we weren't, at the time the council made the decision, it was made over a period of time to keep a watching brief in terms of how the developments are going across the city. And if it appears certain that the new investment wasn't going to materialise, then some adjustments needed to be made to the long-term financial plan in terms of the resourcing. The upcoming budget, the budget for 23-24, is basically year 3 of this approach. So the approach was, to span 4 or 5 years, let's say 3 to 5 year time horizon. We're on year 3 at this moment in time in terms of this approach. Next slide. Many of the new development projects are now increasing their probability of proceeding. The large unknown, as I've just said, is timing, and therefore assumptions of increased revenue are still not included in the long-term financial plan. The impact of the increased revenue from the new development has been modelled and is included in the council report. Pages 47, 48 of the agenda highlight models 5 and model 6 in terms of that new development and the potential for new revenue coming in. But again, it is not prudent and not appropriate for that funding or those revenue levels to be included in the long-term financial plan. But if only half of the revenue materialises that might be out there, council will still return to a sustainable position. Next slide. The audit committee suggested 5 areas, 6 areas of focus, a higher rate increase, including breaking the link to CPI and changing the narrative that is out, that we talk with the community about. I'll come back to that, each of these separately. Deferring project spend and or making project spend conditional on service review outcomes, reducing services or service levels, increasing other sources of outcome, rationalising or disposing of underperforming assets, and including allowances for non-infrastructure strategic projects. There is detailed notes and discussion in the minutes of the audit committee meeting that has been presented as part of your pack for tonight's agenda. Next slide, thank you. So moving to each of those options, a higher rate increase. Let's say if we were looking to reach a break-even position in the long-term financial plan by 26-27, we would need to increase the rates by another 3% on top of what is already proposed. That would require this year to have a once-off 11.5% rate increase, and that would leave us in a break-even position by 26-27. It's very unlikely that the community would accept that as an option. In terms of the comment around breaking the nexus between the rate increase and CPI, in effect, we use CPI as part of our rate increase equation, but it is not the only factor that is considered in the rate or the consideration of the rate each year. As members will know, it is broken down into component parts with different components addressing recovery of the deficit, a provision for new capital projects, new works, etc. So in effect, we don't have a complete tie to the CPI in terms of the setting of the rate. So in part, that nexus between the CPI and rate increases has been broken. And when we are out engaging with the community, the different components of the rate increase and the way that the rating is determined is part of the narrative that's out there. Next slide. Deferring project expenditure was another option that was raised by the audit committee. Let's say we could do no new capital projects until 27-28, except for the current projects in the budget, for example, with childcare and the Surf Life Saving Club, etc. We could use the additional or the 1% additional rate increase above CPI for new capital to instead reduce the deficit rather than putting it towards new capital projects. That will have a cumulative effect over time. If we did that, it would achieve a break-even position by 27-28. The outcome, however, would be that there would be zero capacity for council to deliver on any of the current master plans. We would not be able to put up or access any grant funding that might come up over those couple of years, because we would have no matching funding that would be able to go towards the application for grant funding. If we did this, what we could do was put back the allocation if new revenue is received from new developments or savings identified from service reviews. Next slide. Reducing service levels was something that was raised. We're going to talk about service levels, but also in this element talk about employee costs. Employee costs are the primary driver of council's deficit position. You'll recall on the first slide that we mentioned the decision of the council a couple of years ago in terms of including additional resources to address legacy issues and to work towards the transformation of the city. Employee costs are the primary driver of the deficit position that we have because of that. As council is aware, we currently have 10 management positions or manager positions. We could consider reductions in the area of management. Let's say if we reduce the number by 5, we would save employee costs of about 895k, leading to a break-even position by 2024-25. It would significantly, if we did that, it would significantly reduce council's capacity and corporate knowledge, and it would lead to much, much higher risks of missing transformation opportunities and also not dealing with legacy issues. We have dealt with over the last couple of years many of the legacy issues that council had, but there are still legacy issues to be dealt with. Again, as with the new capital, pausing on new capital and building it back into the long-term financial plan if new revenue is received, these positions could be built back into the long-term financial plan or reinstated if new revenue is received. But of course, by doing that, the disruption in the organisation and the loss of corporate knowledge would be significant. Next slide. Continuing on the reducing of service levels topic, there could be reductions in frontline service levels, but our recommendation is that these should only be considered after formal service reviews are done. It would be inappropriate to simply reduce service levels without actually looking at the full impact of those reductions and how those services could or could not be delivered. Given that, we presented to the audit committee at their last meeting a proposal to introduce an internal audit and service review program. The audit committee agreed that that was certainly an approach to be taken. That is currently being developed, and we will be presenting a model, an outsourced model proposal to the audit committee's main meeting. I will just add in there that the audit committee was slightly concerned in terms of a fully outsourced model, but recognised that the skills were not within the organisation at this point in time to introduce such programs. So at this moment in time, it is the optimum way, but certainly work towards a hybrid model, which would be a joint between outsourced and insourced model of delivering these sorts of programs. As I mentioned in the startup, $250,000 has already been built into the long-term financial plan in relation to service savings. So the service review program will need to first address that $250K and then seek to find further savings through the service review program. Next slide. Increasing other sources of income. Council's other main sources of income are through fees levied at the airport and childcare services. Both of those areas already have increases proposed. and additional grant impact won't impact on council's financial result because of the matching funding that's actually required to be sourced to gather grant income. Next slide. Rationalising underperforming assets is another area of focus. As I mentioned before, the long-term financial plan already includes an assumption of 250,000 savings ongoing within 5 years from the consolidation of the current building stock. There is another item on the agenda for council consideration this evening, and that will generate $100,000 of that 250k requirement. And there is an increased experience of inquiries in terms of industrial land sales, and if they were to be realised, that could also reduce our interest expense equal to around 180,000 ongoing in savings. So those two items combined could achieve the 250k savings already built into the budget at the moment, into the long-term financial plan at the moment. Next slide. Then there are other and further consolidations that could be looked at. We have identified that and some, I won't say easy tasks, but tasks that would be at the top of the list. There is the potential to reduce renewal spend by about 1.6 million over 10 years. And by the end of the long-term financial plan, that would reduce depreciation by about 150k and interest expense by 100k. So that's another source that, whilst at the moment we haven't built it into the long-term financial plan, there is some realistic opportunity for those savings to be achieved. Work is progressing on that, and it will come back to council, but it will require significant community engagement. You know, as soon as you start moving and doing anything with any of council's buildings, community engagement is an absolute must. So, an alternative model to all of those, that was, you know, some data to present to you. And this is an alternative model that that we are recommending, that we need to, in the long-term financial plan, align our assumptions around income and expenditure. What we have realised, and based on the audit committee's questioning of the long-term financial plan and the financial sustainability, is that we built in the additional expenditure over the long-term financial plan in terms of the increased resources to deal with the transformation. But of course, prudently and appropriately, we hadn't built in any income. What we haven't built in is that if that income is not realised by year 3 or within the 3-4 year horizon, if that income is not realised, that extra expenditure should be removed from the long-term financial plan. So therefore, resources should actually be reduced if the city transformation is not going ahead, you know, as indicated through lack of investment coming through those projects not actually coming online. So currently our long-term financial plan, as I've just said, doesn't build in the income from new development. So we should also assume a reduction in resources from 25-26 after our 3 to 4 year horizon ends. And so we could assume and build into the long-term financial plan a reduction of 3 full-time equivalent at the manager level, and also a reduction in new capital budget capacity of 25% at the 3 to 4 year time frame, not now, because we do need that capacity now in terms of the city's transformation strategy. And if we did those two, it would realise us reaching a break-even position from 25-26, correct? 27-28. 26-27, sorry, thank you. It would realise a break-even position by 26-27 in the long-term financial plan. But as new development comes online and as the certainty and surety of new development is actually proven, that expenditure can be reintroduced back into the long-term financial plan as that occurs. Slide. So what that proposal will do, and what we're proposing, is that the annual business plan and budget in its current form be retained for the purposes of consultation. That we allow capacity, this allows in capacity in the short term to start detailed design for capital projects and leverage funding where appropriate. It retains the current FTE to continue partially resourcing the city's transformation. And as I said, it achieves a break even by 26-27, which is actually council's adopted parameter. You may or may not recall that back in January, December or January, council adopted a suite of parameters by which to, on an annual basis, set its annual business plan and budget. And one of those parameters is to achieve a break-even position by 26-27. And that was actually set by council also a couple of years ago, when the audit committee of the day was expressing concern around the long-term financial sustainability of the council and wanting the council to absolutely include the requirement in its long-term financial plan to return to a break-even position rather than staying in a deficit for the term of the plan. Next slide. I just want to, I'll come back to that previous slide in a minute. There are a number of significant items currently not budgeted for in council's long-term financial plan. So members are aware of the systems modernisation project that we've currently got running. Our current information technology systems are incredibly resilient, have been running for a gazillion years. Kathy's term, it's a technical term, a gazillion years, and it's definitely past the end of life. It is still working, but every day we run the risk that there will be major failure given the state of the system. We've been doing a systems modernisation project, and costs at the moment for implementation. So in year one, implementation costs of $1.1 million upfront will be required, but there is no ongoing cost on an annual basis because under the new system, it is projected that the operating costs will actually be less than the existing operating costs that we currently have. The civic building relocation, there is $400,000 built into the plan and the budget, but early quotes are coming through that the relocation costs will be higher, but further work is required on that. But the long-term solution to the civic building, the cost will depend on the future directions, but it certainly could be up to $40 million, and that's based on estimates from the study that we did last year. I want to come back to the second to last slide before we open it up to discussion. And so, as I mentioned, administration's recommendation is to simply, it's probably, that's the wrong word to use, but to retain the current annual business plan and budget for the 23-24 year in its current form. And that budget does deliver on the childcare centre redevelopment. It does deliver council's contribution into the Surf Life Saving Club and a multitude of other projects that had previously been built into the past year's budgets that have been carried forward or that will be carried forward over into next year. What I also suggest is that in adopting that budget, that we are open in our engagement with the community on that annual business plan and budget to advise of the financial position that the council is in and also the actions that are being taken in terms of the long-term financial plan. I think that the updated that if we update the long-term financial plan to take into account the recommendation around the reduction of full-time equivalent staff and also a 25% reduction in new capital from the 25-26 financial year, and that will show us coming back into an operating surplus position. I also think that a resolution could be passed by council tonight that, in acknowledging the Audit and Risk Committee's feedback, that council review those two assumptions on a quarterly basis during its quarterly budget review processes in the context of revenue received for new developments, whether they are in actual fact audited. And so an ongoing watching brief on the probability of the new developments and the increased revenue actually being received, and that resolution be passed, and therefore you keep a watching brief on that and a watching brief on the long-term financial plan and adjustments that may or may not need to be made on a quarterly basis. Open it for questions.
Thank you, Kathy. So councillor Knox has his light on.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of new information that's been presented to us tonight. I would like to have time to look through that. I'd like to have those slides sent to us all. I'd like to be able to go through it very, very carefully. And I'd like us to have a further meeting once we've had a chance to look at that. Because I think we're in a situation where I believe we need to go back to what we used to do in the old days, go through the budget line by line and see what's in there and see what we might think we can take out as an elected body with staff, of course. But I think with the new information, I certainly don't feel comfortable about accepting the business plan tonight without us sitting down and talking through those.
Now, so councillor Simpson.
That quarter review plan is very good. I think we should adopt that sometime in the future. And I also think that with development the way it's going, the way it's planned to go, the last thing we need to do is reduce staff or management staff. We'll send it back, we'll put it back, I think.
Councillor Inglis.
Yeah, I just want to be careful too, so I think the quarterly review is a great idea. And, you know, like Justin explained the other day, we are stretched now with all the new projects and developments and stuff. We probably, if we're going to be honest, we probably need more stuff. And going backwards and cutting stuff out of it's not going to do anybody. You know, we don't want to miss any opportunities, and we don't want to miss potential revenue increases, or be not staffed, or often do is burn their staff out and lose good people as well. So,
Thank you, councillor Cobbock.
Just a question regarding raising rates to 11.5%. What effect would that have on current, like compared to the current rates per week or per month?
Just speak and she's a bit. It's okay.
Okay, so next question, can you discuss maybe the answer?
Well, I agree with that. Can I ask a question about, in the past, we've applied a CPI plus with a 1.2 or 1.6 increase to cover other things. 1.6 or 1.2?
9.
0.9.
Sorry, so the ongoing assumption is 1.9. It does change in the when we get up to the current year budget. We often adjust it based on factors, but the long-term assumption is a 1.9% increase.
Just two things. One, we need to extend the 30 minutes because we're at that time, and also councillor Sharon Watch as an apology has indicated like to say something. It's your discretion as chair. You have
Yes,
to do that.
certainly.
But you can first extend the.
Are you moving that we extend the?
I had a question, but I can move the extension as well.
You're moving that. Will somebody care to second we extend councillor Simpson? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Another
For another
up to 15.
What do you mean?
up to 15?
Yeah,
Up to 15 minutes.
I
Yes, that's carried. Right, so question, councillor Border.
wasn't sure whether Sharon was first, but I'm on
Oh,
that.
my apologies.
Sharon opened first, so she's ready to go. Sorry.
Yeah, councillor Todd.
First question is, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. So it was just comments really. I know I'm an apology, but I just had a couple of comments. One was that I think it retaining the current business plan, I think it's actually a really good idea. I agree that I think the reviewing it every quarter is a really good idea too. I think it's really important that we remember that whilst we're not, as Kathy said, whilst we're not including any new revenue in there, we do still have in there the expenses around what it's going to cost us to raise the new revenue with all the different projects and things that we've got on. I'm going to as well say that I'm really not keen on increasing the rates to 11.5% to try and bring us to a break-even position. So yeah, I'd be really keen. Obviously, I can't vote on it or anything, but I'd be really keen to retain the business plan in its current form with looking at it every quarter to see what we need to shift, change, update. I mean, am I correct, Kathy, in assuming that if we do that, it's not stuck in concrete for the next 5 years? It's literally a plan that will change as things change.
That's correct, Councillor Todd. Council does have a legislative requirement to review the annual business plan, or to review the budget on a quarterly basis. And what we're proposing is that as part of that review, an element in terms of looking at the probability of new developments and new revenue coming online versus expenditure be a specific item that is included in that review every quarter.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Sorry, my head's a bit jumbled. I think the radiation's affected my brain more than anything else. So, but I think you got the gist of what I'm saying. So.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Border.
The reinstatement of the staff, if new revenue is received, it sort of seemed like a contradiction in one way, because I'm thinking, wouldn't the opportunities already be missed if we cut the staff now and expecting them to reinstate them when the revenue comes in? Where would the revenue be coming from if there's no one there to source it and nurture it? So is that even a prudent option? And I realise that the purpose of the audit committee is to look at these options of how to get the costs down. But I sort of think that that's the general vibe. And certainly my personal opinion is that I just don't think it's a prudent option at all, that we must find another way. We're on the precipice of such a huge expansion and reinvention of the city, to be ill-equipped to capitalise on that, is, even if it means the community is, in the short term, I mean, they're not going to be happy no matter what, because the rates are going to be higher. So I just don't think, I'm not giving that much consideration personally, because I just think we can't do it. So that's sort of one comment. And then the community feedback on 11.5%, 8.5%, and 7.5% is, in what form are the community engaged? Like, what do they see? And I guess I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can so that I can get my head around it, but also then so that the community can say, okay, so if we go with 11.5%, oh my gosh, that's so much, this is ridiculous, but it means in a year we're sustainable, whether or not the boom goes ahead for the skeptics out there. Or they can see 8.5%, which is, here's the CPI covering costs plus the 1%, 5.2% deferred. Or we're just going to shuffle down the road this situation that we're in and hope for the boom to come and save us at 7.5 or 6.9%. So with those few options, succinctly put, so the community can digest it, how does that look to the community?
And the community engagement process that's adopted with the annual business plan and budget is very comprehensive, and there are multiple avenues for residents to engage with the information that is presented. It is presented in a very simple fashion. We do have a presentation that steps out how the rates are made up, what goes towards those rates, and then how it impacts council's long-term financial sustainability. The opportunities to engage, as I said, are multiple. There is one which is, if we refer to Becky's principles of engagement that she talked about last week, there is one element of it which is at the inform end of the spectrum, whereby we simply put out the annual business plan and budget, put it on our website and ask for anybody to make a submission. Two, we hold a public workshop or a public meeting to explain it and invite questions, and we talk it through with members of the public who choose to attend. And we also hold two specific focus group sessions, which are attended by a random group of selected residents that are representative across the city. So older people, younger people, people who own, people who rent, etc. And we hold two focus group sessions to do a deep dive into the annual business plan and budget and what it means for council. So we get multiple avenues of input from residents and multiple opportunities to explain. But simply said, we do present the information as simple as possible, including information about what it means to the individual ratepayer. For example, if your house is valued at X, then this is what your rates will be. It represents X dollars per week or whatever the increase will be. So, yes.
And thank you for that. And I did see those ways of communicating, which I was very happy to see. My question is more around, so when I saw, the equivalent of $2 per week, that makes sense to me. That's a cup of coffee a month or whatever it might be, which I think is all palatable. But I'm just looking to see something like the rate, the weekly impact dollar value based on an average like a rate notice or valuation, and then what that means for bigger term projects. And in the community's language, yes, the foreshore development can happen to a large degree, to a medium degree, to a smaller degree. Something as bullet point as that, is that possible?
Absolutely.
Appropriate?
Absolutely. Grant?
Yeah, if I can answer that, I mean, just feel like community, some of my time been going towards sort of getting information together for this discussion here, and haven't fully got into some of, and what we've prepped is all the information that's going on the annual business plan itself. But like you say, I mentioned, I think for this week is, depending on the decision of the council tonight, is to start getting that collateral ready for the things that sit to the side. And I agree, I think feedback, that's based on my next going in terms of, this is our aim, this is based on 8.5%, this is our main document. And that's sort of the content is here, but that's the next bit that this state decision around how to communicate as simply as possible those key things, because just to make it clear when we spoke about this, so for the community that they want to beginning to see the impacts of different rate increases, what it means for council. So yeah, I don't have a full answer yet because that's my next work on. But yeah, thanks for the feedback.
That's all right. Yeah. And on that note, if I can continue, I mean, the key for me, so when I saw, I don't know if you can see, but it was that graph with all the lines going across where waste management wasn't even on the actual screen, but it was a colourful thing. I think that was really great. And then showing the impact that the options that I think we would take the lead in going, look, we can't do a 6.5% review. We're not going to do 11.5% review, but let's look at something in between there. And then showing the abbreviated version. And again, been here for 5 minutes, but my feeling is that the community are just going to see whatever rate we put to them. Oh, sorry, I was not. I think that the community are going to see whatever rate we put to them and arc up. And the conversation isn't going to go much further. I feel that there'll be a small percentage of the population that will want to dive deeply into that sort of looking graph, which is the one with all the lines across it. But the majority, my gut feel is, are just going to go 8.5. That's too much. Keep it low. Give us the water park like Whyalla, etc., etc. So I just am looking to try and find some sort of succinct version with the appropriate options that we are all comfortable with. And essentially, so it can be framed in a succinct way so that the discussion can be had and defended. Yeah, fine, we can do 6.5%, but we're just pushing things down the road. Or we can do 11.5% and we get there a lot quicker. and we pay off debt and we get a water park. Does that make sense? Am I on the right?
Absolutely.
Everybody else had their, oh, you've got some more.
I just agree with Pete. I think the easiest way to settle this, you say 8.5%, people think, shit. You say it's $2 a week, it's $50 a year, people think $2 a week's nothing.
We've been saying that for a number of years. We're using the same line. Look, if I can just throw some comments in now that everybody else is. When we're talking about 11.5, we're thinking of it from our perspective. We're not thinking about it from the community. I believe we have to come up with a compromise. To me, the compromise is the original 8.5. The reason we're in strife is because we're running a deficit. Tell the community that, and they'll immediately point the figure back, well, why have you let it get up like that? Tell them it's going to go up to 11.5, but you're not really going to get anything extra. There's another World War III. I believe that perhaps, I'll discuss this offline just casually with the CEO. If we're serious trying to tell the community we've got a problem, it's the same with our business plan. Yes, we've got to keep pushing the future, the opportunities. But I believe we have to tell them, at least for this year, without necessarily telling them it might go into next year. Times are tough, and we have to tell them why they're not going to get certain things, like all the master plans, which perhaps I have a view that should we not be putting them on hold for 12 months unless something's committed to show the community we've got issues. They want a swimming pool, 50 metres. They want the splash pad. They want the marina fixed. They want. We're not telling them you can't have it right now. I believe when I get out and try to sell about tough times and try to tactfully tell them why you're not going to get those things. Because we haven't got the money. And until we get, and we can tell the community, we're still suffering from COVID. The population definitely go backwards and you'll lose services. And that in moving forward for this next couple of years, there is going to be real tight, stringent management on what we do, very astute management, financial management. And some of the master plans will have to sit back until we get the government funding. We can tell the community we're still waiting on governments to formalise sort of funding. I think we've got a mix, my view, I don't get the vote unless it's a tie, is that we have to try to plan for the future, but tell them things are tough at the moment. And that's why perhaps you're not going to get everything that you would like. I've got a meeting out at the rec centre with 2 residents that want to talk about the rec centre. I pretty well know what they're going to be talking about. And I believe at the end of that conversation, I can't say I'll take it on board. I have to be a little bit more upfront and say, well, I agree, but we don't have the money at this stage. And that's happening with a lot of our projects. We just don't have the money. But we've got to come up with that balance in delivering the message. Just my comments.
Can I ask a quick question of you, Phil? So when you say we just don't have the money for that, and then the inevitable question that I am going to set is going to come back to that, well, why not? Where are our rates going? I know it's a simple, perhaps a mundane, obvious question. I don't quite know how to answer it.
So,
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And is that the go-to? So is that the suggested? And that's why I took a photo of it. It's for that reason. It's kind of like when I saw that, I'm like, okay, that puts it in colourful context. Yeah, but I just wanted, I guess, to put it out there. I'm on the right track there. You're not. I'm suggesting not.
Well, I think
the same conversation.
rely on a lot of government funding, which isn't there at the moment.
Yeah.
So any or redeveloped rec centre is going to be somewhere between 30, 60 million. We don't have that money. Those that want a new swimming pool, they have to find the money.
Can I ask Grant to provide some framing. We have presented a lot of additional information in this presentation tonight. Grant?
Yeah, so
Sorry, just before we start, Grant,
Yeah.
we need to extend.
So I'm gonna go on 30.
Another 15 minutes, I suppose.
I'll second Bill's.
Right, moved councillor Simpson, seconded councillor Border. Another 15 minutes,
Yes.
those in favour? Thank you. And I've still got you to get back to Catherine with a question.
I'll just answer so I don't get question. Also, the about 11% average was in this property would be $54. The 119 for May. So that's an increase. But I guess what I wanted to frame in here is try and pull this stuff together, what we've presented. So I guess the audit committee suggested to us that perhaps we need to fix our financial position in 1 year. And what we're proposing and what this budget is about is that we're not actually trying to fix our budget position in 1 year. So the reason I know that 8.5% sounds like a really large rate increase compared to historic values, but it's important to understand that the 8.5% rate increase is largely because of external conditions. So it's mainly to do with the value of CPI. And while Kathy said there isn't a complete connection between CPI and our rate increase, it is probably the biggest driver of our rate increase. Everything we do has some connection to CPI, but it might be higher. So when we're talking about an 8.5% increase, we're not talking about something that's trying to, that we're doing a high rate increase because we're trying to fix our budget position in 1 year. That's what the 11.5% rate increase will be. The 8.5 is actually in line with our long-term financial plan. It's the same as us doing a rate increase, say, of 5.7% last year. It's 1% above CPI. I think that is important to keep in mind that I understand that it's a very high figure. It's, it's confronting, but it's driven by external pressures. It's not an attempt to fix our position in 1 year. And I think this is saying that we understand that we're in a deficit position, but we feel that has to be fixed over a number of years, and planning for these extra opportunities that are coming, and that will fix it in a couple of years if those opportunities don't eventuate. So I just wanted to frame it, because I know that there's a lot of information that we've put out, and it might seem that the 5% is an attempt by us to just up rates to fix our financial position. That isn't it. This is the rate is actually set out by our long-term financial plan in a normal
year. Councillor Campbell.
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor. I think we need to, I think 11.5, although when you look at it as $154 a year, is going to be too high. It's simply not. People are going to go, using my own words, batshit crazy if they hear that. And I think relating a lower, I think having a lower rate increase and then missing out on stuff will be something they will accept better, because it's related back to them. We've got people going mad, but if it's going up a little bit rather than a whole lot, you can just say, look, households are having to cut costs as well. People aren't going to the cinema. They're cutting back their kids' school activities. With electricity, water and services that households do, and we have to cut costs as well. It might mean you're going to get something, just going to have to wait a little bit longer. I think people would find that more palatable than going in with the 11.5. I know it's only a matter of $40 or $50, but the psychological aspect really come into it when they see double figures. Thank you for the rate increase.
Yeah, Councillor.
Mayor, so thanks, Grant, for just clarifying those figures. But that basically 11.5% works out to an extra $3 a week. 8.5 turns out at $2 a week. So it's not a massive difference.
70 cents.
I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with it, but maybe it is something we should consider. We did decide as a team at our get together that we're going to be bold. Is it time to make a bold statement? Maybe, maybe not.
Councillor Borden.
So 11.5%, $154 annually. $2.28 weekly. It's a 70-cent difference between 8.5% and 11.5%. I'm not saying either way, I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same numbers. And annually going from 8.5% to 11.5% is $25.
It's the perception. I cannot support 11 I can sell 8.5. I can sell that we are still using COVID and all the costs. We are working behind the scenes to reduce costs. It's going to be a very stringent year. I can't personally put my heart there and say, I agree with 11.5. The mayor has to. I find that difficult. After all, we was originally told 8.5 was sufficient for this year. I go with that. It shows a start. It shows we're doing all this. Because yes, the audit committee did have some really solid comments to make, which I believe, seeing now what's being done, we are addressing. But yes, the 8.5 is going to cause enough issues. But I think we can sell that. I believe I can sell that. Well, far better than 11.5 because they're just not going to want to listen. See,
Councillor Sharon Todd would like to know something. Yeah.
thank you. Councillor Todd, sorry. Yes, if I look at my screen, I see your hand up.
That's okay. Again, just a quick comment. 8.5, and you have to wait for your water park or your pool fix up or whatever. That to me makes sense. But I don't think we could realistically say 11.5% and you have to wait for your water park and you have to wait. I think then I know we're not, but then we just look greedy. People don't, you know, before I came on council, I would have been one of those people who went, bloody hell, what are they giving me for my rates? Now I know what I get for my rates and I know how hard it is to for council to pay what has to be paid and find money to do everything that they've got to do. I think we'd really struggle. I think we'd all find ourselves highly unpopular if we said 11.5% and you're not getting anything, as opposed to 8.5% and you're not getting anything.
Thanks very much, Councillor Todd. Councillor Inglis.
My simple comment is it's got to be minimum CPI. Whatever CPI settles it. If it's 8.5%, 9.5%, 15.5%, it's got to be minimum CPI. We can't be seen as going, we can't give up any ground. Because all we're doing is pushing the problem down the road. And that's going to cause more grief in time. We need to go back to next year and say, oh, sorry, it is 12% or 13% because you can't keep going backwards. And I'll suggest that year, that COVID year where we never had a rate increase, that has caused us all sorts of grief now. But we wouldn't be in this position, but we are. So
that wasn't due to COVID, though. That was.
Yeah, I understand that. But yeah, I think Sharon's a great ally with that within yourself. I think she's very passionate, so she's. But no, I think it's just got to be, from my point of view, it's just got to be a minimum CPI at a bare minimum.
Councillor Campbell.
I think between the 8.5 and the 11.5, everything's gone up for everybody. And I think while the 11.5 isn't a great deal of money, for some it could be the straw that breaks the camel back. And we can't just think about, well, that's just the rates. We have to think about the people that are choosing between buying food or taking their kids to the dentist, because that's what it's coming down to. And although it probably is an affordable rate increase for them, we have to think about the mental health of our community as well. And that I think, yeah, the 11.5 and you're not getting anything, I think, yeah, not understanding, like I'm learning a lot, but I still think even with that amount of money, that will be hung in the streets for 11.5. So, and I personally, I couldn't do that, knowing what some people are going through out there. I think that 8.5 will struggle, but we'll all physically survive. But 11.5, yeah, you'd want to have a step route, I think, for the community at the moment.
Councillor Knox.
What troubles me is if we go for the 8.5, and I understand the arguments for that, It troubles me that we're probably looking at another similar size rate increase next year. Whereas if we went for the 11.5, we could probably turn around next year and say, okay, look, that's only gone up 4%, 5%. It just concerns me that if we cut it down this year, you're going to be looking at another decent sized increase again the following year, at least one more year, I would think anyway. But I still think that whatever we do, we've still got to look at service levels.
Oh, yes.
Services. I don't think we can ignore that. We've got to be bold. We're going to make decisions. We've got to try and get things back to where they should be. And, you know, sometimes it means you can't operate in a Rolls Royce situation.
Councillor Board.
And on that note, that's where I would like to see it put in succinct terms that if we go for, so for example, if 11.5% meant that people could have a water park this year, and I don't know whether it does or not, but that's a material impact. It's more, and maybe that isn't okay with most people, but if there's a benefit they can see, maybe that offsets that. Yeah, totally on the same page as what David has just said, that we need to pull back. And I don't know what form that takes. I just am really looking forward to somebody putting in layman's terms, you know, here are the options and here are the 1 or 2 or 3 implications that you are going to see and notice. And if you don't see anything, whether it's 8.5 or 11.5, then I think we really do have to place as much of an emphasis on the perception as much as the material impact. 70 cents might not be much of an increase, but if the perception is so much so, then maybe it's not worth it.
So,
two things. First thing is that I think the discussion's gone off a bit on track in that we're talking about an increase potentially to 11.5, which is actually going to deliver major projects. The additional 3% was purely to do budget repair or financial re-engineering. So it doesn't, you shouldn't be equating an extra 3% or 11.5% with delivering more. It's actually just bringing down the deficit. And the second thing is Councillor Todd wants to make another comment.
let me see, Councillor Todd.
Can't shut me up, can you? I was just going to say what Justin was saying, that my understanding is 11.5% would give us a break-even position pretty much next year, and 8.5% keeping things as we've got them will give us a break-even position by 2026, 27. I think that's correct. So we're not giving anybody anything extra for another 3% of rates. And then the other thing I was going to say was that I feel that we've kind of gone off the track as well of what the audit committee's feedback was. I feel like we're now just talking rates and not all of the other things that the audit committee recommended in their feedback. So does that make sense to anybody?
Good point, Councillor.
Probably time.
Also getting close to needing an extension, so we either need to extend or you need to bring it back into.
I think we need to bring it back into formal debate. Somebody care to move that second that we go back into formal debate, formal procedure? Moved Councillor Clobiker, seconded Councillor Campbell. It's like Russian roulette, these numbers just.
We 3 minutes tonight.
Put the motion. Those in favour, carry. Thank you for making a call. Which means.
Need to get someone to do something.
Yeah.
Through the mayor, make a suggestion of some possible wording that somebody may wish to consider, and it would be endorse the content of the draft 23-24 annual business plan and budget with, together with an updated model long-term financial plan based on And then this is the part for council consideration. As I mentioned during the presentation, administration's recommendation was based on a reduction of 3 FTE.
Based on number eight.
A reduction of 3 FTE from 2026/27, sorry, 2025/26, and a 25% reduction in new capital from 2025/2026. And then the next, number 2.
I see.
Right. And then number 2, a new number 2, keep that number 2 as well. In acknowledging the Audit and Risk Committee's feedback, council will review these assumptions within the long-term financial plan on a quarterly basis. On a quarterly basis. In the context of projected revenue, or new developments, and either retain or review the assumptions up or down accordingly.
Up or down, you just.
Up or down accordingly.
If I have an amendment, does that come after somebody proposal that?
And that was purely and simply based on administration's recommendation. If you're wanting to change those words, absolutely go for it.
I've got a question. Why are you putting in the reduction of 3 FTEs from 25/26 and a reduction in new capital from 25/26? Why not from next year?
Timing is aligned with what we believe is the resource requirements in order to achieve the continued transformation of the city and the timing of possible, predicted developments. And then in terms of the reduction in new capital, because we believe that the retention of new capital in the current budget and in next year's budget is critically important with towards the transformation of the city in terms of being able to provide monies to attract grant funding. And grant.
And as per the slides, I picked that timeline based on the conversations that were had when we adopted the updated organisational structure. There was always a discussion around sort of 3 to 4 year timeline for the changes before we needed to go back and say, well, these things haven't happened and we now need to pull back. So I think we tried to align that with the discussions and the thinking of some place.
Gives another 18 months, 2 years for development. Gives another 18 months to 2 years for developments to unfold.
Yeah, question, councillor Simpson.
No, I have an amendment to that proposal. I don't know where to put it now, or
It's
Yes.
it's not really an amendment, but
I propose that we accept that with one A removed. That would be my motion.
and Grant will add to this, if that was removed, it would shift the proposition of moving council back to a break-even position to a later date than the 26-27 financial year.
I maintain it's a long time to be reducing managerial staff. That's why I'm concerned about it. The cost is more by removing them than by adding them.
If I provide this process, this comes back to a question councillor asked earlier. So the recommendation there is that we keep the same FTE for this coming financial year and the one after, and then build in a decrease from year 3. And it's important to recognise that the long-term financial plan is only a plan. It's projections based on council's best knowledge at this given time. And council have to review that at least on an annual basis when adopting the annual budget and consulting on it. And we've added a second one in there that we're actually going to look at those assumptions on a quarterly basis. So I think that is prudent in terms of the modelling and what it looks like, but noting that doesn't have to happen like that if basically the things that happen between now and when we adopt the 25-26 budget.
Okay, being guided by clever people and me, I propose that as a standard.
I say you're going to leave it in there.
As it is.
Right, thank you. Yes, Bill Simpson moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Inglis. So after a lot of discussion, a lot of serious consideration by everyone, we have that motion. If there are no further comments or questions, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Record that was carried unanimously.
Unanimously. Thank you. Take a break. Take a break now. Yes, 15-minute break. It's about 16 minutes to 8, so we'll be back at 8 o'clock to finish off the rest of the agenda. Yes, moved and seconded to Councillor Inglis, seconded Councillor Simpson to adjourn. Could I have somebody move that we reconvene the meeting? Move Move Councillor Clovica, seconded Councillor Westerman. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you, carried. Back onto our meeting, item 13.2.2, the code of practice for access to meetings and documents. We've had a report, we have a recommendation. We need to speak to it, CEO. Take it as read. Councillor Clovica has moved, Councillor Knox seconded. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. (13.2.3) The dog and cat registration fees for 2023-24. Had all the information. There is a recommendation. Does somebody care to move that recommendation? Or did you have discussion? Moving? Councillor Border has moved. Is there a seconder to move that recommendation? Councillor Clovica. Mover and seconder. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. 13.2.4, the Audit and Risk Committee Council Proxy Appointment. Yeah, we have a recommendation there. I think as the report would have explained, this is a backup position that is required for us to have to ensure that meetings can go ahead. I guess it is a case of calling for anybody that would like to perhaps take on that appointment for 8 months. If you haven't read your report, get a little bit of a spiel from you. And if there's more than one, we have an election. So you putting your hand up, councillor Border?
Yes.
Do you have anybody else that would like to nominate for that position?
They meet during the day, don't they?
They are during the day. Yes. Now, do we wish councillor Border to do his 3-minute spiel, or do we accept him?
It's not necessary. if there's anyone not-
But don't have to work for it, do you? Councillor Knox?
Happy to move.
Right, no councillor Knox, seconded councillor Simpson. We confirm councillor names are already there, councillor Border, as councillor's proxy rep. I'll put the motion, those in favour. Okay, thank you. Item 13.2.5, the Audit and Risk Committee Terms of Reference. Yeah, you've had that all there. Can I call for a mover to move the recommendation that we adopt the revised Audit and Risk Committee Terms of Reference? Move councillor Clodicar, seconded councillor Inglis. I'll put the motion, those in favour. Carried. Thank you. 13.2.6, monthly budget report. Does anybody wish to speak to that, CEO, or take it as written? Any questions? Councillor Knox.
I have a question on page 158. Total value of consultants used year to date, 469,161. Does that include lawyers as well, or is that an additional cost?
That excludes legal costs.
Do you have any idea how much legal costs? Year to date.
Yeah, I mean, just a second. As at the end of March, legal costs were approximately 94,500.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Somebody care to move receipt of the monthly budget report? Move councillor Campbell, seconded councillor Simpson. Put the motion, those in favour. Carried. Item 13.3, City Growth Ordinary Reports. There is nil.
Excuse me, Mayor, could I just make a comment?
Sorry.
You're right. So page 161, the monthly project update, is it possible when the papers are put together that part is a landscape? Because I find it really difficult to read.
Yeah, you turn your computer to computer.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, fix that, that's me.
Sure, we can sort that. I support that. Councillor Campbell.
Oh, sorry, I didn't take my thing off when I.
And. That's possible, place, yeah, wait a minute. 30.4, thank you. But it was, yeah. City infrastructure ordinary reports, we have nil. Item 14, information decision reports, 14.1, council members, 14.1.1. The mayor's list of engagements, more than happy to answer any questions. One event that I didn't manage to get to last weekend, and I have had an incredible amount of feedback from within this organisation and a lot of feedback from outside of people that attended the library, the Writers' Week There's certainly a good spread of photos throughout the whole weekend. I'd like to congratulate Natalie and the team at the library behind me. The feedback that I've been getting is overwhelming. And people that are absolutely over the moon about having had thoroughly good weekend, very low cost. So, while I couldn't make it, I've certainly followed it on Facebook, but I would like to congratulate them, and I think that under my list of engagements, although I wasn't there, is an appropriate time. And possibly that could be passed back on to the staff and everybody that was involved. The directors and the CEO, yes, but it's incredible what I've seen on Facebook comments and people that have actually made the comments to me personally. And I know to other elected members. Right, I'll be through without anybody asking questions. I'll keep moving.
I just wanted to second your comments. As a writer myself, I wasn't able to go, which was disappointing, but a lot of the writing community said it was really, really good. Especially having the local talent there, Rachel, able to give perspective. It gave people a lot of people are going to start writing that I've spoken to because they think the local do it. So yeah, a lot of positive feedback as well.
So I think all the efforts they put in was definitely worthwhile. Councillor Knox.
I'm moving the recommendation. On your list of engagements.
Right, thank you. Councillor Knox has moved. Do I have a second to Councillor Border? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 14.2.1, the monthly information report, April 2023, from infrastructure / city growth. Another very extensive report. If anybody's got any questions, Councillor Knox.
I have a question. It's a great report. Thanks, staff. But on page 176, the baggage scanning machine failed. This is a pretty new piece of equipment. Are we concerned that we might have future ongoing problems with this equipment?
Yeah.
Where do you think? Through the men, we're not aware of this is likely to be an ongoing issue. I will take the question on notice though, and I'll send an email to councillors, but we think it's a once-off.
No further questions. We have a recommendation. Somebody care to move? Second. Councillor Westerman, seconded Councillor Campbell. Put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Notices of motion, we have one. Item 15.1.1 to do with the green bins. Notice of motion from Councillor Knox. Council requests that within the next 3 months a report be submitted to Council on the pros and cons and costs of introducing a weekly green waste bin collection, with the red bins being collected fortnightly. The report to include estimates of potential waste charge reductions. Yes, moved by Councillor Knox, seconded Councillor Campbell. Put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Questions on notice? Have a couple. 16.1.1 trees on Bradford Street. Dogs off leash from Councillor Klobuchar. Do you want your questions and answers read out?
No, that's fine. Just a couple of comments. Thanks for replying concerning the trees on Bradford Street. We all know that there was a significant cost to council, but I did notice that back in 2016, a similar thing happened. And I was just curious about what we're going to do to prevent this from happening, but I'm happy with that response. From the dogs off leash stuff, I understand administration's response as well, similar to what was given to Councillor Simpson. I suppose my only comment is that I think this is going to be an ongoing problem from that compliance perspective. And even me on the weekend, I was at the beach and I was walking along the breakwater on Saturday morning, and there was resident with the dog off the leash, and it clearly, there's signage that clearly says that your dog must be on a leash, and I pointed that out to the gentleman, and he told me to F off. So. Was interesting. So yeah, look, I understand it's difficult to, have this ad hoc type situation, but, it may need to be extended to include some weekends, just initially. And I'm not sure of the hit rate in terms of prosecution or fines that are being dished out. But maybe that's the lever that needs to be pulled to make people kind of wake up and understand that these rules are in place.
Yes, we are planning on a random inspection regime outside of normal working hours. At this moment in time, we don't have staff that work outside of normal working hours. But yes, we are planning on a regime whereby there will be random checks done in and along the foreshore.
And perhaps it's something we could put on our comms teams list for some updated media, particularly on our page, just reminding people. Thank you. That's what I was about to scroll up, and of course I can't control it.
Just ask a question on that. How does that work with if we get a complaint through the council and someone's got a photo that identifies the person of the dog? Are we able to act on that, or does it have to be a compliance officer that witnesses?
No, we can act on where there is photos, and if somebody gives us information in relation to breaching of the requirements. However, in general, the authorised officer needs to satisfy themselves that it is the person, that it is the dog, that a contravention of the bylaw has occurred at that particular time. And so acting on a photo from somebody who may have sent it in is not the preferred method in order to issue an expiation notice. We would prefer our officers themselves to actually be seeing the infringement from an evidence point of view, but we can.
So I'm just thinking from what there would quite often be dogs running up to the kids, big dogs. They were able to document that perhaps.
Beg pardon, sorry.
There were quite often big dogs down there on a Sunday morning. And quite a few times I've had to step between the dogs and the kids because my kids have no boundary. They'll be not on the dog. If someone was to be there that knew how to get that together, would that be acceptable or at least considered?
That potentially, again, it is up to the authorised officer. If the authorised officer, because the authorised officer is the issuing officer in terms of the expiation notice, they have to be satisfied that a contravention has occurred. And so if they can be, and if they are satisfied, then there's no reason why that they wouldn't issue an expiation notice. They may go down the path of issuing an educative letter in the first instance, and then if it occurs again, then move towards an expiation notice.
Yeah, that was my suggestion, was my idea as well, because 4 years ago, I was looking after a couple of friends' dogs who they had like that piece of treatment. And the guy looked over the fence and said, and wrote me a letter saying, if you have 400 registered dogs on your property, go ahead. But a letter was sent to me, not a fine.
Yeah.
So I came in and sorted it out. But we sent a letter to these people. Let's do it again. Maybe they can get that.
We have used that approach very recently with a couple of people and their dogs that are recidivists, for the want of a better word, in terms of dogs off leash on the foreshore, where staff have had photos where our authorised officers have been given photos that have been taken by other residents. Whilst they've not actually issued an expiation notice on the basis of those photos, we have issued letters and advised that we are aware that their dogs are not complying with the laws, and that we will be implementing random inspections, and so please do the right thing.
Very good.
Sorry to go on about that. If we're issuing letters to dogs that are off lead at the beach and not acting, and that dog happens to attack a person or another dog, would that somehow become an admission liability by the council for not doing anything? No.
And I'll take that one on notice in terms of in terms of absolute detail, but no. Reason being is that the authorised officer has the preference in terms of issuing expiation notices when they are satisfied that an offence has occurred under the bylaw, and they gather their own evidence in terms of determining that offence in order to issue an expiation notice. And so we cannot be absolutely 100% certain that an offence has occurred through the delivery of a photograph to us.
Thank you for all that. Moving on to item 16, questions on notice. 16.2, 2.1, lease and rent agreements. You wish that read out, councillor?
No, I don't, but I would like to ask a question. Out of 204 leases, 57 are currently outstanding. Do we think that's good enough? And do we have the right people administering these leases?
I did comment with what Councillor Knox said. We look at the reply that we're given is a list of procedure that we follow that we're obviously not following. If there's so many outstanding.
And in terms of the outstanding leases, administration agrees that that is not a good position to be in, and we are absolutely working in terms of rectifying that situation. There are multiple reasons as to why that has come about, and it is one of the legacy issues that we have been dealing with over the past 18 months to seek to get all of those leases and licenses up to date. Over that period of time, we have been developing new processes, new templates, new instruments in terms of those leases and licenses. And we also have now and are wanting to include in all of our leases and licenses provisions whereby the strategic development of the city and the transformation of the city can happen in conjunction with and in partnership with all of the lessors across the city as well. There's quite a lot of relationships there that need to be worked through. So in short, no, it's not good enough. Secondarily, we do have a plan that is now working towards rectifying that as quickly as we possibly can. Within some recent changes that have occurred across the organisation from an organisational structure point of view, within the portfolio of the manager governance role, she has a project now which is around bringing all of the leases and licenses up to date, together with the facilities coordinator. The facilities coordinator has got a wealth of knowledge in terms of the current leases and licenses and the instruments that need to be used in relation to that. So there will be a partnership across corporate in terms of the manager governance, with infrastructure in terms of facilities coordination, and also then with city growth in terms of the utilisation of all of the buildings across the city, because it's not just a matter of entering into a lease or a licence, because we're wanting to bring it into a framework that our buildings are being appropriately used by the community groups, and that we can get building consolidation happening across the city as well.
Online?
The project plan that has been, it's halfway through being set out at the moment. I don't have a definitive timeline for you, but I would like to think within 12 months, absolutely everything will be up to date, and that will also include the commencement of a very detailed review into council's community land management plans, because it has to start with the community land management plans, and then leases and licenses are a tool to ensure that council's community land is managed properly.
We able to get a quarterly update, or you talking 12 months?
I will make sure you get a quarterly update.
Okay. I just done with the fact that, for instance, the large football league, we have an active lease for them, and we're doing all this repair work and spending money on and we don't have a lease.
there's a lot of work to be done in terms of ensuring that, number one, we've got strategic management of our facilities across the whole of the city, which is why we paused for for that period of time around the leases, because the leases are a tool to help us get that strategic management in place. I know that sounds just administrative words, but it is as it is.
If I can put it in less.
Thank you.
We had a golf breakfast in terms of existing arrangements, in terms of leases and licenses that had been patched together over many years. So it was truly a legacy issue. We had some groups that are not for profit that are paying 15 times more expense at higher rates than commercial undertakings and vice versa. So we wanted to get the framework in place. We wanted to get the templates. We wanted to get consistency across all leases so that we've got essentially apples for apples in terms of the lease arrangements. And we have to ultimately, at the end of the day, work with the various users of the buildings. In some instances, there were unwritten agreements of years gone by that are alleged to have helped shape or inform some of the existing arrangements. We couldn't find that documentation, so we you know, it sounds simple just to enter into some or update leases, but in some cases it needs unpicking a lot of history and trying to get some movement towards a consistent framework going forward. And it is having used it as a reference as a tool. It is a very important tool that can actually either help or hinder our path forward, because in some instances, some of the negotiations that we have to have are going to be unpleasant for the end users, because they may be asked to now pay for something they historically haven't needed to pay for, and or in some instances we're flagging that as the city develops, their future use of that building may have limited tenure. So, you know, we're working through all of that, and our manager of governance will have a key role in terms of that relationship management at the front end.
I understand your comment about the rate fees, etc. I just don't understand how we have an organisation with a business or a lease that has been signed for 7 years. So, you know.
Agreed.
Thank you, councillor. Thank you, CEO.
Good question. It's a slightly different vein, but in all the new leases, I'm assuming, as you were just talking about, but I just wanted to confirm flexibility being built into those new leases to not limit future development, so that there would be the opportunity for the landlord, us, to be able to manoeuvre with the lessee based on whatever we don't know in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good.
Item 17, questions without notice. Let me, sorry. Question there, what is the process for ensuring that new leases are entered into before expiry? Has that been answered?
I think it has.
Yes.
Thank you. Right now. Item 17, questions without notice. Do we have any questions without notice? Councillor Inglis.
I've coupled. Does the coastal road between Whyalla and Fitzgerald Bay Hill, is that still classified as an escape route for Santos?
Yes.
Because it is in a terrible state of repair. I would suggest that a normal car would not be able to negotiate that road in patches, especially coming out a couple of those gullies. I had my 2 wheels off the ground in my Prado trying to go up there the other day. It has got massive rocks. It is, nobody's escaping. If you try to go up there in a normal passenger car, you're done. It needs some serious work done to it. And I understand that we've had a lot of rain, it's been washed out, but going up a couple of those gullies, up those hills, there are boulders sticking out of the ground. So, like I said, I was screaming at me because I had 2 wheels off the ground. I thought, gee, so
Just used to provide money towards the maintenance.
my next question, is there any?
Is that something the administration can take on?
So it's basically from Whyalla turn off to the Fitzgerald Bay Hill. it is in a terrible state of repair, and there's sections of it that I would suggest probably, if we're going to be honest, probably should be closed.
My recollection serves me correctly, back in the day, the early days, there was signage both ends to point out that it was emergency. Yeah.
That was,
Probably those signs would have gone many, many years ago.
have been, yeah, I was just curious, because I was out the garden, I thought I'd just go for travel on coastal and have a look, and I thought,
I have a question on that, as we'll provide some information.
oh, cool.
Councillor Board,
Oh, sorry, a second question, sorry, Phil. I had a young lady say to me tonight that she's just started joining up to the rec centre, started using the rec centre. She said she feels very unsafe in the car park there at night, coming out in the dark because it's so poorly lit. It's a rec centre car park. So as you come out of the front door and you walk into the car park, she said, to the point she's probably not going to go back anymore. She just feels that the lighting is not adequate and she feels quite unsafe.
Through the mayor, we have recently looked at both lighting and security at that facility. I don't know what the outcome is, but happy to bring some information back in relation to potential upgrades. From memory, it was going to be quite expensive, but we can bring that information back.
Councillor Board.
I don't know whether this is a question or a motion, but I remember when we were talking about waste management being so expensive, which it is, and just the discussion around the budget and how we message it to the community. Is it wise to, or is it strategic to put something out ahead of that time? Just planting the seed around waste management, how big of a cost it is, and through whether it's from an educational perspective to encourage the community to start taking a closer look. And in conjunction with what David had mentioned, that's when I wrote the question down, with his question, I think, which was the report going back about the red bins being picked up every fortnight. So at that same time, perhaps, could we look at doing something, some sort of messaging and education to the community around that to reduce costs, given how rates are going to.
I don't recall reading that what was happening.
Change of finance.
Could note that one of the budget items, so one of the items included in the budget is the funding to fund the Taking the Pledge program. So I imagine that the communication will be centered around that program financial year. So that'll be work done with KeyStat.
And that's education to the community around what goes into it. Yeah. And so what would the timing on that be?
My understanding, I was just talking to such the other day, they're looking to start as soon as possible in the new financial year. So they will be updating their quotes for work late this financial year. So as soon as the budget's adopted, they can get going, starting ASAP.
Is that messaging coming from KeySat or is that from the council? Like who's sort of who's sending that message out to the community? And can I, on that note, I think it would be important if it came from us personally. I just think if the council can be seen to be
It'll be a
that.
based on past experience and these sorts of programs, it'll be a combination.
I was just going to say, I mean, clearly I might have a conflict of interest here, but nothing, just general comments.
Is that Kristen?
That's the Director of Infrastructure.
Yes, Director of Infrastructure.
Thank you, through the mayor. We are looking to run an education session starting next year, mainly around the kitchen caddies. We have been in contact with councils that have already made the move to fortnightly red bin pickups to find out how they've travelled over the journey and how their communities accepted it. The information does suggest it's a 12 to 18 month process. One of the biggest inhibiting factors we have is the amount of contamination that we have in the green and the yellow bins. We need to get that contamination down first before we can make the move. But all of that information would be in the report that will come through to council. And Chiruka, our waste officer, does put out at least 2 Facebook posts a week around handy tips with waste. And to get back, I think, to the original question, council would be doing a lot of the education, and we do partner with KeySab as well to have their brand name attached to it.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Simpson.
Can you say that chips they put out, they were very good. There's a couple of things we read the other day, I thought, didn't know that. But I got well, things. A year ago or so, or less, they talked about an area being put at the dog park for puppies. I'm just wondering if things progressed there, or is it still in the pipeline, or is it been shelved, or?
The dog park for puppies, there is an area.
Puppy area.
There is an area there already for puppies and older dogs.
It's not.
It is fenced off securely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Used to have a lawn in there and seat. The lawn's all gone, but the seat's still there.
But it is definitely still right there. Thank you.
Councillor Inglis.
I was just going to say about KeySAP running the pledge program. They did it in Port Pirie and did a fantastic job. They got the right educators, they rolled it out and they ran the whole process. We partnered with the Pirie Council at the time. And KeySAP did an outstanding job and it was really well taken.
Thanks for that info. Councillor Campbell.
I just wanted to ask the question, with the fly tipping, out bush, does council clean that up? And can we find out from other councils also what the percentage of increase in fly tipping was when they introduced the once a week red bin? And what the cost increase was in relation to fly tipping?
You explain what?
Sorry, fly tipping, trailer.
Illegal tipping, illegal
out
dumping.
bush.
Illegal dumping.
Yeah, illegal dumping, taking your rubbish out bush.
So we had a workshop not that long ago, and you may have possibly missed that, where we did have some historical data in terms of illegal dumping versus over time. So that we can make sure you get a copy of that report.
Thank you.
If the board go to Port Augusta on the weekend and go for a trial run, that's you'll still see what it is.
Yeah.
Councillor Border.
The, again, I'm jumping around a bit, WTF, do we have any idea what the feedback was on the name or just a feeling about the name? I've just had a few negative comments from the community that it's put them right off. I actually thought it was quite trendy, but I just thought I'd ask generally, casually, candidly.
I've had pretty good feedback from people I spoke to.
WTF.
Very
Yeah.
punchy and
Yeah.
brought a smile to people's faces. Some
Yeah,
said,
something different.
Yes.
oh, geez, that, oh, how funny is that? Oh, we did that, so.
I had a few negative comments and I just said, well, you're talking about it, aren't you? And they went, yeah, and I said, well, we shouldn't achieve.
Mr. Cutlass, that's.
Oh. And yeah, everyone else thought it was progressive.
I mean, 200 people showed up, so I was pretty happy to
Yeah.
announce that back to the person.
All questions without notice? Item 18, motions without notice. Does anybody have a motion without notice? No? Item 19 is consideration of confidential items, so would we have a mover and seconder to go into confidential? Move Councillor Clovicar, seconded Councillor Knox. Put the motion, those in favour? Thank you. Carried. I will close the meeting at 9:03. And thank you for your attendance and your deliberations.
Yeah, that's great.